right. I think we're getting started here. Hopefully everyone can hear us today. Thank you for joining, everybody. I am here with Victoria Youve from Dewpoint Communications. We are in the midst of our Staffbase Impact webinar series, and the theme today is bedazzle your internal comms and do more with what you've got. I think that this topic can speak to small teams or teams that are working with limited internal comms resources. I think they can also help you if you are looking to use the resources that you have to do more and to prove to your leadership that your work matters. So we're very excited to partner with Victoria Youve to talk about this today and to provide us with a little magic on how we can improve as communicators. I'm Carla Kath. I'm with Staffbase. Please join in the chat and join the conversation with myself and Victoria. We have a lot to cover and a lot to talk about, but we saved some time at the end for questions. So we will get to them. Just ask anytime and I'll keep a running tally, and we will make sure that we get your questions answered near the end of this presentation. So without further ado, this is Victoria Youve.
Hi, oh look, and I'm here as well. Hi, I'm everywhere. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a busy Wednesday and a busy time of year, and I really appreciate you taking some time to join us and learn about bedazzling your internal communications. This is a great topic. I'm excited to be able to share some fun stuff with you guys and to make this a really fun webinar. So hopefully we've done that, and please, as Carla said, be sure to ask questions, interact. Let's bedazzle. So a little bit about me. I'm Victoria Youve, SCMP. That stands for Strategic Communication Management Professional, which is my professional designation. It's actually the highest certification available to a communicator. And you have to have been practicing in the field for about 11 years to be qualified to even sit the exam. So I'm really proud of that certification. I am the founder of Dewpoint Communications. We are headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts, but we serve clients virtually and in person, mainly in Boston and Los Angeles, but anywhere else as well. The mission of Dewpoint Communications is to prove that human-centric businesses do better. And my company works with businesses to help them create strong employee communications, culture, and leadership that helps them grow smarter, stronger, and faster. This leverages my more than 12 years as a communicator with a primary focus on internal communications, executive communications, and employee comms. I've done a lot of culture transformation work or culture building work, and at very large scales, we often call that culture transformation work. And that is a particular passion of mine, helping companies to work better and smarter by really taking a human-centric approach to their culture, and obviously internal communications is a huge part of how we do that, and I think you'll see that come through in the content that we have for you today. I have also worked in a lot of different industries. If I had to list them all, I think we'd be here for a while, but more than a dozen as I counted, both as an in-house practitioner and as a consultant. So I know both sides of it. I know what it's like to be in-house and to be really building your internal comms every day. And I also know what it's like to be able to come in and work with clients to really extend what they've been able to create already. I have worked with very small companies up to some of the world's largest tech giants. So I'm really proud of the diversity of the companies I've worked with. So hopefully that comes through in what we've, in a lot of the examples that we'll talk about today. And in my spare time, I'm the vice chair of the International Association of Business Communicators. IABC, which is my professional association, and I laugh only because of the spare time comment. IABC is my professional association. We have about 9,000 members in about 70 chapters around the world. I was the Asia Pacific chair, and now in the Northeast, I've served on region chairs here, and now I'm very proud to serve as the international vice chair for the whole association. So that is why you should in any way listen to what I have to say today. I always think it's funny to talk about yourself for a while at the beginning of these things, but then I also realize that you don't know me, so you might like to know why you should listen to me. However, the story starts actually well before that. Before that, in a land far away. So the truth is, I wasn't always a professional internal communicator. My first career was actually in Hollywood, and I worked in feature film development and production at Warner Brothers and Disney. And then I wrote and produced television shows for a while after that. So I got a really good training in this land, this strange land of Hollywood where content is king and creativity is mandatory. Sometimes in corporate it feels like it's a nice to have, but in Hollywood it's a given and it's a must have for to be successful in your career there. So when I went into communications, it was obviously a very natural fit because I had strong writing and project management and was able to kind of build on those in an increasingly strategic way. But something happened to me along the way in my corporate career, and that is that I forgot that it was okay to be creative. And I forgot that, in fact, I am a better communicator when I'm creative. And not only is it actually okay to be creative, these days, it's imperative. So here's another thing that I learned in Hollywood that I think comes as a surprise to people. Having a lot of money doesn't always fix your problems, and it doesn't always make all your communications dreams come true. And I've seen this again and again in my communications career. Big budgets allow you to spend more money, but they don't guarantee big results, and they don't equal creativity. You can spend a lot of money to no great result. And to be honest, big budgets actually can make you a little lazy and complacent because you're not forced to kind of dig deep and find that inner creativity. And that's why I think this topic of bedazzling your internal communications and working with what you have at your disposal is so relevant and important. One of the things we're going to talk about is about bedazzling, and that's about how to put a little more magic into everything you do, and how to have more fun doing it. And more importantly, how to really make an impact on the business. You know, sometimes we can get bogged down in tactics and just delivering, and we forget that our job is really to make an impact on the business and to move the needle there. So we're going to be talking a lot about how creativity can impact and really make you a powerful strategic partner in your business. I also really love the bedazzling theme because of the sort of like fairy tale Disney connotations. And I think it also helps us because we as communicators really can have our own fairy tale ending. So we're going to get into that. Everyone with me so far? Any questions? Violent objections? Okay, so as I said, I really don't want to be a dry, dull webinar. You'll see that this is like my slides are kind of sparkly. They get more sparkly. And so please ask questions, hop in. If I don't see it, Carla's keeping an eye on the chat box and the questions, and she'll pop in and let me know that someone's got their hand up or that they've asked they want some clarification on something. It's kind of like in Peter Pan. Remember the part in Peter Pan where he says like Tinkerbell's dying and he says like he needs all the children out there to participate and clap their hands to bring Tinkerbell back to life? That's a little bit what it's going to be like today. So I'm really going to be counting on your participation to make sure this webinar is lively and that you get as much out of it. Because I know what I know, but out there we've got a lot of people who have a lot of information as well. So I'd like to start with a quick poll, if I may. Here's the question I want to ask you. And you can put in the poll or the chat box. I have, in my communications role, I have all the budget, time, resources, energy that I need to do amazing, creative internal communications for my business. That's the question. The options are yes, definitely, no, or sort of. So pop your questions, your answers in there. What do you think? Everything you need, you got all your wish list and giant teams. Maybe you've got a design partner, a design agency partner that does all that for you. Okay. No? Oh, no. Oh, huh. Really? No? Not at all. Well, that's interesting. Okay, well, it seems pretty consistent. So maybe when we're our fairy tale, we're feeling a little bit like this at the moment. This is Cinderella, a royalty-free image. I'll come back to that. See how she looks kind of sad? And she's got her dresses kind of in tatters, and she's all alone. She feels sort of overworked and dejected and unappreciated. Anyone ever felt like that? A little bit in their internal comms role, like just sigh. She looks a little bit like Taylor Swift there. So, oh, that's not Taylor Swift. That's not. But kind of like sad and all alone in her turret. And maybe she's got some wicked stepsisters waiting outside to be mean to her. It happens. If you ever felt like this, I want to tell you, you are not alone, okay? I run an association of communicators. Trust me, everybody feels like this. It's not just you, all right? So today we're going to think about how we can get Cinderella out of that attic and start bedazzling her. However, before we get to that point, let's start by thinking, what does Cinderella really want? What is Cinderella's dream? Wait, is this the dream? Is this the dream? She wants her prince, that's him. She wants a castle. She wants to be happy and fulfilled. And she wants not to be tortured by her wicked stepmother and wicked stepsisters, right? So as internal communicators, let me ask you, what is it that we want? What's our why? What's our magic castle? So to my mind, there is one real holy grail or magic castle of internal communications. And you can argue with me about this, but I've tested it pretty thoroughly over the years. In internal communications, and this extends to the employee engagement and employee experience space, in internal communications, I believe that everything we are doing is to help our employees answer this question. I know how what I do every day in my role as a communicator, in my role everywhere in the company, right? I know how what I do every day in my role helps us to achieve our big picture goals as a company. That means I, as an employee, understand where we're going, what our goals and priorities are. I understand the business. I know how my work fits into it. I know what behaviors will contribute to getting us there. I know what actions. I know how to contextualize the information that comes to me and how to make connections and do my job better so that my part, my role, is actively contributing to that big picture, to our success. And I consistently know that every day. And as the landscape changes, my ability to keep that line of sight to how what I'm doing connects to the big picture, that never changes. Now that's why we have jobs, right? Because the landscape is always changing, but our magic castle never changes. I know how what I do every day in my role helps us achieve our big picture goals as a company, okay? Tell me later if you disagree, but I think it's a pretty good starting point for how we want to structure what we're working on, and especially when it comes to bedazzling. So I like to think of it as this path. That line of sight is kind of like a path between the employee and the big picture strategy. And luckily for us as communicators, we are the magic broomstick, right? Our job is to be that magic broomstick that sweeps the path clear of any confusion, misunderstanding, or lack of clarity about how what I do helps us to achieve the big picture. And that means that what we are communicating is in service and supports that line of sight. So we're looking at the actions, the behaviors, and the beliefs of every employee. And again, every day, everything we do is in one sense or another in service of this goal, okay? But for the moment, the magic castle seems a little far away, I think. Because here we are, Cinderella's still hanging out in the attic, and the prince and the castle, they're far away. But we do have that magic broomstick. So let's see what we can do with it. Let's see what we can come up with and how we can bedazzle with what we've got. So let's look around. Let's look around at our internal comms toolkit and what's around the business. What have we got? What else have we got? Oh, look here. All right, we've got some stuff. So I see a needle and some thread. I see some scissors, a measuring tape, pumpkin, bits of straw, some cloth, and some tiny animals. I see a couple of mice, and I see Cinderella. And all right, so it doesn't look like much at the moment, but we've got some resources we can work with, and we've got some helpful little friends, right, who want to help us. So we can do something. So just like Cinderella's fairy godmother helped turn that tattered dress into a beautiful gown, well, what if we could do that? How does that sound? What if we could take that? What does that mean for an internal communicator? The truth is a little bit like being Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz. We want to get to that magic castle when it comes to moving the needle on the business. The truth is we have always had the power. We have always had the tools we need at our disposal. We never needed more resource. Well, we always need more resource, but we can do a lot with what we have. Everything we need is right here in front of us. And the trick is to take what you've got, get out your magic wand, and bedazzle it. How does that sound? Okay, so a good internal communicator is an expert at turning straw into gold. I worked in government for a while overseas. Hang on, we're just going to go back a little bit. Thank you. I worked in government for a while overseas, and you know what? This trick comes in really handy because in government, especially, you've got a lot of dull, dry material, and you got no money. So you have no choice but to get creative and think outside of the box and to find ways to turn that straw into gold. So we're going to be looking at all the boring stuff, the stuff that you look over, just kind of annoys you. And we're going to be, corporate announcements, things that you have to communicate. Who has this where people say, your leaders say, oh, we need to communicate more. And what they really are saying is we have a lot of things that we want to tell people, so we want to push those messages out. And you have to figure out how to turn them into communications gold. This tends to happen a lot. So our businesses are full of content that that needs to be bedazzled. Very often some of the time with corporate messaging, one of the challenges can be that it's hard to see that line of sight about how communicating some things that seem sort of dry could actually help us tell a story about a larger strategic picture. So that's something else we'll be talking about. All right, I want you to hop in here and tell me, what resources do you have lying around? What bits of straw, thread, helpful little friends? What have you got in your business that you could bedazzle? What's something that you've overlooked that you think as I talk, you're like, oh, that's an opportunity. I could see how that could work. Feel free to pop them in the chat. One of the things that I've found is engagement surveys are really interesting. I remember one time, it was actually in a government agency, and one of my colleagues had this really amazing, engagement surveys are kind of dry and compulsory and annoying, and oh no, they're not. I think they're really important, but it can be a big ask pushing people to complete it. Anyway, she did this really cool campaign where she took a lot of old vintage, like kind of 50s romantic, kind of traditional romantic posters and artwork that actually had come from the National Archives, which was interesting. So they were, again, all royalty free and we owned them. And she made this whole she juxtaposed it with a Facebook campaign. So it was like, she would have a picture of a couple and it would say, how would you rate your engagement? Like really, did it something, whatever, like I'm engaged in a relationship, single, it's complicated. And I always really liked that because of course, a lot of times in engagement, the answer is complicated, right? Let's see, someone has suggested new products, volunteer projects. Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. That's a great CSR story. New hires and current employee spotlights. I think this is right on. I think you've definitely got some cool things you can work on. Excellent. So keep thinking as we go through. Keep thinking about how we can do that. So this is where, so we've got these, but at the moment they seem a little, move to the next slide. Oh, thank you. At the moment, all of these can seem sort of dry. So what we want to think about is how a little bit, where we can put in a little bit of magic alchemy into our communications. So my first big tip is to get into the habit of curating existing content, not necessarily creating new content from scratch, because none of us have the teams or resources or frankly time to do that. But we can repurpose and reskin and reposition a lot of what we already have. So one of the ways that and we're always looking to buy back time. So that's one of the ways we can do it. So let's have a think about what are some of those, what are some other of those random pumpkins and twigs and other things we can bedazzle. We've got another question here about open enrollment or benefits communications. I am a big fan of this. Thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, because in open enrollment and benefits, I think, I mean, who doesn't get to like open enrollment season and sort of dread, right? Because there's a lot that has to be done and it feels like a compliance exercise. However, benefits and total rewards are a brand story, right? What do we value as a company? And how do we value you, our employees, as part of this? And how are we telling you this? How are we contributing to your employee experience with these benefits? So even though, and it can be hard to bridge that gap, partly because benefits people are generally compliance driven and it feels like a very process heavy time of year to them. But where we can take some of that back and really create, like, surprise and delight our employees and tell the story or pull out gems in our benefits packages that they may not have known about, that tells the story about how we value you and how you are part of our connecting to our big picture. So I think that's excellent. Some of the other things, I personally love a good HR announcement. Any kind of HR thing is actually my secret go-to, because HR communications tend to be very process heavy and process driven, and HR themselves really does benefit from and actually is delighted when a communicator can help bring their communications to life. And when it works well, it's such an amazing partnership with HR. How many of you guys have just great HR partners, and just together it's like a symphony, right? Recruitment campaigns, external communications, and market-facing communications are a gold mine, but especially recruitment campaigns. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, because it's an opportunity, because recruitment's already telling the story about why you should work here and what it's like to work here to the market. So when you can take those back and reuse them internally, it's gold. And very similar to that point about the benefits communication, we're telling the story about what it means to work here and how we value you and what you can expect. Reward and recognition programs are great, because that's where we really get into telling the story of values as behaviors. This is who we want. This is what good looks like here. And when we can showcase someone who is demonstrating that and what that looks like, they can be a model for other people. Employee thought leadership. When an employee has spoken at a conference or has shared some of that, very often you can get them to create some content, very high level, about what they shared. One of my favorite tips there are with any content that you don't want to actually have to create, is you just give them a standard interview template, 5 questions that are going to lead to strategic responses, and then you send it to them, and then you can use it as a Q&A. What was the most important thing you learned at the conference that you think other employees here would really be able to benefit from, right? So you can structure it, but you also don't actually have to do much to create it. You can reskin it, wordsmith it a little bit. It's also in their words, and we'll come up to that. We'll come back to that. Customer success stories, where we can feed that back in. Again, often external communications or marketing will have created those already, product spotlights. And of course, media coverage, and again, external, where you can take good news stories that have happened in the media and bring them back inside to mirror what other things people are saying about us. And again, making that connection to the strategy is another great opportunity. I have got a list of all of these, and there later on we'll talk. We've got a resource pack that has a lot more of these listed for you that I'll send to you. So I'll move through them, but it's really thinking about what some of those really basic everyday kinds of pieces of information that may also not be spread across the business. So also, like, for example, if you're a global company, local stories that highlight a piece of the employee story or of the company story, but that it might be different than other people are seeing in their everyday life, especially if you're sort of North America-centric company that has satellite offices. It can be really great to see what someone in Adelaide, Australia is doing that they may not know about. So let's go back again and talk about what is our story? What is our fairy tale ending? So here's Cinderella, and she's got some things she wants. And let's think about in our companies. And I'll ask you to pop back into the chat. In every company, what you're really trying to achieve and where you're really wanting to move the different, there's a lot of commonalities, but every company is a little bit different. So share where you're looking to move the needle in your business. Where could internal communications make a difference in your business's outcomes? Some of the areas I see frequently are recruitment and retention is a really is a great one because it's very measurable, right? We know when we're having trouble recruiting, and we know and retention. We know when that employee experience and the communications aspect of it. It's a very obvious pain point for businesses, and it's often a time that they come to communications to help solve a problem. What else? Pop some other ideas in the chat. Culture change is another one where we're really looking at, again, telling that story of demonstrating the values as behaviors that we want to see in the company. Yeah. And innovation as well. Thank you for that. How do we create greater context for our people so that they understand the business better? Again, they understand their role. They understand how what they do connects to the big picture, and they can create think contextually and laterally and come up with deliver better outcomes. Yeah. And of course, employee engagement is always a great one as well. And again, it's very measurable. We can get a lot of great data from employee engagement about where we want to focus. So again, one of our core roles is to help employees contextualize every day and remember remembering how what I do every day in my role helps us to achieve the big picture. And if you haven't figured it out, one of the most powerful ways we can do that is through storytelling. And when we bedazzle, it means that we don't have to do all of the storytelling ourselves. We can let other people help us. That's why we have those helpful little friends like Cinderella has Jack and Gus, right? We have our own little friends. Here's some ideas of when we get out our magic wand and we turn our straw and our buttons into something bedazzling. Here are some examples of what that could look like. And some of these I've made up and some of them are real, but they all kind of tell a story about the kinds of opportunities that are out there for us. So I'll go through them one by one. And again, these are in the resource pack as well, so you can see them in more detail. Again, as I mentioned, recruitment. So your recruitment or marketing team has already created a video that they're using externally. And so, for example, here you'll see one called Dogs of Dell. And this is one, I did some work with Dell a while ago. And this is one that they had done. In the resource pack, I include the link because it's an externally facing video. Anyone can see it. There's nothing proprietary or confidential about it. So Dogs of Dell, the recruitment team, had done this great series of videos showcasing and telling the different stories of Dell employees' service dogs. And one of the things that was really cute was that they did the stories, the videos, in the voice of the dogs. So it was the dog telling the story about what he does every day and how he helps his Dell employee. And so it was really cool to see that. And it gave it a very different tone. And obviously the video is designed to help prospective employees understand that Dell takes diversity and inclusion seriously and is a good employer and accommodates people's needs. But most employees would never ever have seen this video, right? Or these video series. And gained the same understanding so the internal communications team took the video and repurposed it to use internally on the internet and in different platforms, and to tell the story again, so that would include like links or profiles of the employees themselves. So used this existing content, this found content, and bedazzled it to tell a really great story for employees. And it ended up being one of the most watched videos, one of the highest rated internet series ever. Here's another one. So who has done HR comms and has found themselves in performance management season, or especially if there's a new performance framework or some changes? It seems like there's always changes to performance management frameworks. So your HR team's getting ready to start performance reviews, and they have a whole lot of comms, and they've told you we've got a whole lot of things, and what they want to do is press send and send a whole lot of emails. And I've noticed, bless them, HR emails generally are like each paragraph is about 6 sentences, and they seem not familiar entirely always with a bullet point. So they're very dense copy, and very often they will tell the story that HR wants to tell, but they're not always audience centric. And we are, because that's our job as communicators. So one of the ways we can take something that could be very process driven and make it into a story and tell a great internal comm story is to create a creative campaign around it. So you'll see here the race is on. So this is an idea about having a whole race or endurance metaphor, right? And the whole process, and telling the story of how you as an elite athlete, as an employee, what are the milestones? It's almost like a training guide for what you need to be doing for this performance management. So you're creating a bit of competition and a bit of incentive and some intrinsic motivation to improve and get better. And again, right, the way we engage people in performance management processes and performance reviews is really vital. It is a big part of how we move the needle for the company. It's a big part of how people understand how what they do helps us to achieve our goals. Another thing that I think is underused is using social media from the outside in. You know, our employees are creating content for us all the time and in their own voice and in really creative ways that we can take and bring inside and share, again, to showcase some of the values as behaviors. So this is actually another, especially if you use a hashtag in your company, it's very easy to curate and bring these together and create and tell that story internally. So this is another Dell example. This is actually a video, an Instagram video from Halloween that was from they had an event, and it was like kind of a cool creative event where they made these little pumpkins, and it was like about scaring the competition. I can't remember what it says, crush the competition. So they made these funny pumpkins, and you can't see it, but there's a Dell pumpkin there, and the little pumpkin says Lenovo, and the other one says HP, and it says dry ice coming out of his mouth. And this was this really cool video. So this already exists, and it just pulls in this idea of something that had been done, employee created, and that you don't have to do, but you can tell the story again of how other employees are contributing to the big picture. And another big benefit, obviously, is that you're co-creating content with your employees. This isn't a heavy-handed push message. You're pulling it because this is their own voice and their own tone and their own images. So you're really reflecting that, so it will always convert better. The next one is also outside in, and that's this one, working mother, hearts us big time. Oh, my emojis looked a lot better on my slides. I'm sorry. It was real cute when I had it. This is a real company that was featured in Working Mother magazine, and this is, again, an opportunity to tell what other people are saying about us inside. But again, this was about a company who had really great workplace working accommodations for mothers. And so it's, again, like kind of like benefits and total rewards, an opportunity to tell that good employer story to your people. And it reinforces cultural values, what good employer looks like, boosts engagement, and it's right there. You don't have to do anything except to reskin it a little bit, contextualize it, and share it. And then the last one is the dreaded IT announcement. Who has had these IT announcements, putting spin on a brick, right? It's pretty hard to bedazzle an IT announcement, especially since they also seem to have like a lot of paragraphs of very dense content that is all not particularly interesting to anyone but IT. And in the resource pack, I share kind of breakdown of a template that you can use to help your IT department create more user-centric, audience-centric ways that also will save you time and still get important messages across. Because of course, IT messages are very often important. They're how we run our company, and it's our job to help them tell their story effectively. So first, when we look for highly visual content, we have to do something to make it visual and to bring people into it. I love this picture of the two really excited kids at their laptop. I have to say, I actually use that image kind of a lot because it's so emotive. And also also creating a very clear call to action. This one says, if you do not download this IT update on November 14th, you will seriously never know this kind of joy, like ever. So it's colloquial, right? And there's a clear call to action. And so you can take that and it draws people in. And of course, there's a series of links below it that will provide information. One of the biggest tricks I have for IT announcements is I make them put right at the top, you need to read this if you are a project manager in San Jose, this kind of person, have this role. So very clearly right at the top, you need to read this if you, and if you're not one of those people, you can just delete it. Right? How many times have we gotten halfway through an IT something and been like, oh, this actually doesn't apply to me. I don't even know what that platform is. It happens all the time. All right, so here's some examples these are some examples of like basically found items. It takes very little to create these, and they're not bad for some sticks and twigs and pieces of straw that we had lying around. So now what I would like to know is to hear from you some of your examples of how you've turned straw into gold. What have you done? What are your favorites? Everyone has a favorite story of something that was that really needed bedazzling and was really dull to start with, and that they were able to transform. Sometimes it's a marketing initiative that you've taken inside. I remember once I had a really interesting, I was working for a very dry organization. It was around land management, and there were these very technical surveying type people, and they were very passionate about their work, but really no one particularly else was, except then there was a giant earthquake, and suddenly what they're experts at is knowing where the land was the day before, and then suddenly it wasn't there the next day. So everyone wanted to talk to them about what had happened and where the surveying was and what the differences were. But still, it's very dry content, so it's hard to tell a story, a compelling story about the subject. But one of the things this took a little work to bedazzle, I have to say, talking to the surveyor, was he explained that it was important to get it right because it had to do with the grade of the land and understanding the grade of the land. And that eventually after the earthquake and the rebuild, they were going to try to relay sewer pipes. And so knowing the grade of the land was really important because you need to make sure that it's going downhill, right? And but creating that image of understanding, and it was quite polite the way it was phrased, but it was very clear that this is important because you need sewage to flow downhill, and that is relevant to everyone. So it was a very popular media story, but it also gave us a really great chance to bring that messaging back internally, because people internally were really excited, especially since one of their colleagues who had kind of a boring seeming job had just had their kind of 15 minutes of fame in the media. And it gave them a chance to also get to know that part of the business better and to understand how they could work with it better and create that sort of cohesion as a group, which actually was very important actually at the time of a land management agency after a major earthquake, because there are so many moving parts that needed to connect together. I think that's my favorite story of turning straw into gold, because I when I went into that, I just wasn't quite sure how it was going to come out. So let's go back to some of our examples. What do they all have in common? So one, can we go to the next slide, Carla? Thanks. What do they all have in common? So one, they're all light-hearted, they're all highly visual, and we want to use video wherever possible. The human brain processes video 60,000 times faster than text. So it's a really powerful medium. Now we know this from our real lives on Facebook and Instagram. We know the power of video. And that's one of my other points is we want to reduce the friction between what people experience in their real life and what they experience with our communications at work. And we want to, wherever we can, we want to make those mirror each other as much as possible. I always think it's so weird that we have these like really great platforms for our banking and all this stuff at home. And we go to work and it's like we go into the Stone Age, you know, we're hanging out in SharePoint or, you know, SAP. We've got these platforms that are like enterprise and they're not user friendly and they're not, and it's this real disconnect. So wherever possible, we want to help reduce that friction in our approach. So that means also being colloquial and jargon free and having a clear call to action and keeping it short. You know, I always say no email, if you can't fit an email on your phone, right? If you can't read it in one thing on your phone, it's too long. Because how many of us just read emails on our phone, and if we have to scroll, we're like, oh, I'll come back to that later because it's too hard. So you never, as a standard, any kind of standard communication, a story, you know, you have people for about 350 words. After about 400 words, it's really diminishing returns, and very often what will happen is people will just stop reading altogether, kind of like when you pick up your phone and you see a long email, you're just like, no, I'm not even going to bother. Whereas if it fits on the screen, you're like, okay, I can handle that. So again, it's not even that like you start losing people after 400 words, it's that they just won't even bother reading any of it. So then there's no point. And we know this can be hard sometimes, pushing back with executives who want like a lot of content and a lot of detail. But we as professional communicators, that's our area of expertise. We know that that just doesn't, there's no ROI on that. Again, one of the things I hear, the pushback I hear about writing in a more informal style, and is that it's not professional. I won't seem professional. And this is a tricky one, and I think it really does depend on the organization that you're in and the company that you're in and its culture and its tone. But I want to challenge this. I want to push on this, and as communicators, I really want to push for us to be more informal, more colloquial, and to mirror the language and the tone that our employees use, what's relevant for them. What we're really trying to do is not have, it's not about having perfect grammar. It's not about being right all the time. Our job is, again, to be that magic broom and to sweep the path clear. I understand how what I do helps us achieve our pictures. So there's an aspect of it which is by any means necessary, okay? And that will change, and that's part of our job as communicators, is to really be tuned into what is going to work best for our audiences, because of course we know we have multiple audiences with different needs in the organization. The more you can mirror the way what your employees experience in real life, the better off you'll be. And I would also argue, you know, what's professional is moving the needle. And what's professional is taking content that already exists in your company that you don't have to pay more for, that you don't have to spend more resource for, you know, and finding new creative ways to reuse it and repurpose it and tell those stories that help employees thrive every day and help your company succeed. That's what I think is professional. And I think it's a healthy debate to have about what that looks like in an organization. Next slide. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about creativity. Because sometimes we can forget our creativity when we are faced with a lot of dull, dry content that we have to bedazzle. And that's why it's so important to always have our magic broom and our magic wand out. Where does creativity come from, and how do you learn how to bedazzle, and how do you learn how to straw into gold? And it definitely does take a little bit of magic. And I will say that being creative as an employer communicator is a muscle that you have to build up. So here's a few tips. One, Put yourself in your audience's shoes, not your own. Get out of your own perspective, get out of HR's perspective. What did they find attention grabbing? Again, looking to reduce that friction. What would they find compelling? Once you start putting yourself in that in their shoes and looking at the company and where you're communicating through their eyes, you will naturally come up with more creative ways to do that. I also think use existing culture. Look at what's around you. You know, think about what's in the zeitgeist, or is there a song title you can reference, or a quote, or a metaphor, or an allegory. Look what's already in existing culture where you're not going to have to build context between your message and the audience. They already are going to have some prior knowledge and understanding and context, and you're going to layer in on top of that with your message. So let something in culture or the zeitgeist shoulder some of the burden for you. By definition, it will also be more creative, right? Because it's also more fun. And think about the essence of what you're communicating and not so much about the detail. Don't get as bogged down in the detail. Think about what is the story really about? What is the essence here? And when you know that, you can come up with a theme or a message or a way to approach it, a way into it that's at the nuggety center of it. And not like, and sometimes this can happen, especially with an HR or an IT communication, where it's not about the thing, the widget, it's about that why. So always going back to that why, that what's in it. And again, that's that what's in it for me, right? Which is part of being audience centric. Also, follow your employees' lead. Take something like that social post that they've already created and extend the tone, riff on it, create a series around it. It's already going to be, they've already created it, it's already in their voice. So use that and keep bedazzling it to tell your message from different perspectives. We want to close that gap between what people experience in their real life and their work lives. And so this is what I call blur the boundary between work and life. Blur stands for believe. We want our employees to believe that we see them as people and not just as employees. L is we want them to learn something new and in a different way, and we want to short circuit the tendency to just tune out corporate messaging. U is for understand. We want them to understand the nuances, the call to action, the context of what we're trying to communicate. And R is for reflect. We want them to reflect and spend some time on how this information affects them and could help them do something differently. So that's what blur, and that's again spelled out in the resource pack. So blur is really about trying to capture some of employees' mental and emotional real estate. And to do that, we need to be creative. And of course, I didn't put this down there, but keep it simple. When we try to get too clever, we can miss the mark. So where you can find an obvious hook, grab it and start from there. I'd like to hear from you if you got any examples of how you've been creative or something that you've done and that's worked well for you. I see that someone's mentioned some creative ways they've taken HR communications, and similar to the idea of creating a theme around it, they created a competition or a staged kind of an installation piece so that it really came to life in the space itself, and used part of their headquarters space to take people through an experience of the performance management framework and the changes, so that it wasn't just on black and white and two-dimensional. It really came to life. I love that. I love that. Cool. So one other thing I want to talk about, and this is what I hear a lot, is also this thing about creativity. And that is, could we go to the next slide? I can't be creative because I don't have the design budget or a designer on my team. I don't have that. I can't do that. So yes, you can. Nobody, don't worry, like almost nobody has designers on their team. Some people have designers, but most people don't have big budgets for design. And fortunately, the world has made this a lot easier recently, especially since we need things to be much more visual. And you'll notice there's not a lot of words on these slides. I've put more words in the resource pack, but I've really tried to keep the slides themselves fairly visual. So these are a few tools that I use every day that make it super easy to create compelling visuals. So one, I use WordSwag, which actually is designed to create social cards. It's just an app on your phone. I think it's free now. It used to cost $5. It will pre-size an image around like a Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or in different, like a 4x3 or 16x9. I often will take a 4x3 and design a slide for it, and then export it at a higher res and use it as a slide. I didn't do it for this one, but I very often will create something in WordSwag and make it a slide. So it's great for social. It's great for online platforms and mobile first platforms as well. It's super easy to use. Canva is another one that has a whole range of templates and things you can do with it, and images, and there's a free version, and I think the business version is like $13 a month or something that has some additional capabilities, and you can use that as a team. I found that to be invaluable. I know there's others. Canva also, like for example, the sparkly templates, the sparkly gold, that was a background from Canva that I just exported a slide with it and then used it. In terms of images, there's a few great ways. Every single image on this presentation came from either Creative Commons, like from Flickr or something that I found in Creative Commons, or from Pixabay, which is a royalty-free stock image site. Wherever I used Creative Commons, I've credited and attributed the photo on the slide itself. But there's a lot there that you can use. And actually Pixabay is hardwired into WordSwag. So when you go and you look for an image in WordSwag, it's just pulling them from the Pixabay database, which is helpful as well. So you've got a lot of images there and options. In terms of paid, now this is a big debate because I know there's one other big, I'd love to hear, you want to put in the chat what you use for stock images or for online design tools that you found. I'd love to hear about them because I know there's others that I haven't used, or stock image sites I haven't used that are royalty free. Stocksy is a site that I love for stock images. It's not free, you do have to pay for them, but what I love about it is that they're like the most unstock imagey kinds of images that you can find. So they feel very real, and they have just a very different tone to them than you would find in sort of a standard stock, and especially when you're looking for images related to workplace stuff where it like usually looks like a bunch of people sitting in a conference room and maybe fist bumping each other. And with Stocksy, you get a really different, more creative take on that. So those are some of my hacks for how to be creative and visually creative for like no money at all. So I want to come back to our magic castle. Here we are. And hopefully today you've gotten some ideas for how you can inject a little magic with the piece into your business with the people and resources and content that you have around you. And remember that when you keep your eyes on the prize of this magic castle and the Holy Grail, I know how what I do every day in my job helps us achieve our big picture goals. When you keep your eye on that magic castle and that prince, you can achieve great results. And the really fun part of this fairy tale is that it just goes on and it gets better and better. And the more creative you are and the better you get at bedazzling, the more opportunities you start to see. And so it really creates a virtuous cycle and can reverse a lot of the frustration that sometimes communicators feel because they are feeling constrained by resources or what they have. So the more creative and bedazzling you can get, the more fun you're going to have. I promise. I promise. So I would love to keep the magic going with you guys. And I want to thank you for spending time with us today. We're going to have some questions in a moment. And I hope this has been helpful to you. I want to say, please reach out to me if you have any questions or if I can be helpful to you. And I'd also love your feedback. We're really excited about bedazzling and we want to kind of talk about this more in different ways. So I'd love to know what was helpful for you, what was confusing, what you'd like more of. Really interested in your feedback, and you can email that to me there on the slide. I also have this magic resource pack that I've created for you, which has some information from these slides and some additional context and information, some tips and tricks. That template, for example, of the IT template. I've got that. And if you go to that link on my website, www.dewpointcomms.com/bedazzle, hop on my email list and it will automatically wing its way to you as we speak. Okay. Carla, should we have time for a couple questions? Can't hear you. Maybe we don't.
Here I am.
Hi.
Magic.
Hey, Magic.
No, I'm looking here to see some of the questions, and I'm so excited to download Victoria the resource pack as well. And we will send out that link to everyone that was able to join today and those that weren't able to join us also. So that is good news. I think there are a lot of questions about kind of the age. Oh, okay. So here's one. Here's one. This one is about reaching managers and getting them the information that they need to communicate with their teams. And so I think that is a common challenge also that we hear at Staffbase. Middle managers are often the ones in between and the ones that are really have the biggest communication needs in the organization. What can we do?
Oh, this is like a whole webinar in itself. The frozen middle, right? It's a tricky thing. And this, again, obviously goes back to the audiences and knowing our different audiences. And you're right. Managers are some of the most critical stakeholders that we have, and they have the greatest ability to influence employees' understanding. So I think there's so many different ways into this question. One of the best things to do is to create a whole separate, I see manager communications as almost a standalone initiative piece, an initiative work stream, because it has a lot of moving parts that are in some sense different from our regular internal communications and kind of what we're talking about here. There's an aspect of manager communications, which is manager as coach, and how they, and making sure there's two parts, making sure they have the skills to communicate effectively. So there's kind of an L&D piece of it, and then there's giving them the toolkits and the information and the distilled information that they need so that they can consistently and effectively communicate with their teams as well. So I think it's a piece, has a lot of different moving pieces, but I think it's helpful to pull it out and look at it as a whole, because of course, before you muck into manager communications, you really need to know quite a lot about them. How many there are, where they are, what kinds of teams are they leading? So I see this a lot in tech. Managers leading development, teams of developers, a very different dynamic than a manager leading a sales team. So it's such an important piece of communications business that I think it needs its own little universe and studying. And I think the place I start is looking at who they are, who they lead, what their current challenges are, how they like to receive information, what kinds of platforms they use. And they'll all tell you that they're really busy because everyone's really busy, but drilling down into what that means a little bit more, because you are going to have to tailor something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think middle managers would love the bedazzling concept.
I think they would. Who wouldn't?
I think so too. All right, we're almost out of time, but I know I wanted to get to this slide here, Victoria, and just let everyone know that if they want to see some communicators like themselves in action that are actually doing bedazzling communications to reach their workforce, especially in large organizations that are spread out and dispersed, they are starting to work with us to create great mobile platforms that have different spaces for middle managers and influencers and admins of all kinds. So if you would like to sign up for a demo with us, go to staffbase.com. There's a demo button right there on our homepage, or you can go to staffbase.com/demo, sign up, and we can kind of show you some of this bedazzling work in action. Also, Victoria and I are going to have breakfast together in December. On December 3rd, 9 o'clock. We would love for you to join us if you are in the area, or if you're not and you want to come over and start your week off with some sparkle. we are going to answer some of these questions live and just have a roundtable discussion about bedazzling your internal comms and doing more with the resources that we have. I'm very excited about this conversation. Victoria has already helped me so much.
I'm excited. I can't wait.
Yeah, can't wait. So RSVP to my colleague Kimberly. It's KIMBERLY at staffbase.com. Get on our list, and she will make sure that you have all that you need to join us that day.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, and we want to thank you, Victoria. I think it was
my pleasure.
So insightful, and we will share all of the information from this chat and about the breakfast and about that resource pack with you, and we hope to see you guys again in January.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Bye.
Bye, guys.